Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. Join us today as we talk about one of the ways Elon Musk is making his big ideas happen. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another Advanced Studio Classroom. I'm your host for today. My name is Simon, and you are joining me for our June news article. Our Newsworthy Clips article, of course, is made up of 3 little lessons each month, and today we are on the second lesson. Our lesson for today is called Elon Musk's Boring Company is Opening Its Tunnel. And I'm joined in the studio today by 2 panelists. David Morton, welcome back.
Hello, hello. So good to be back.
And Josh Bickle. Welcome to you too.
Thank you, Simon. Always good to be here on Advanced.
Now, when I read the title, I read it in such a way that I made the company sound like it was a boring company, like the word boring was being used as an adjective to describe the company. But that is not, in fact, the way our title should be read. It should be read more like Elon Musk's Boring Company is opening its tunnel. Now, explain that to me, Josh. Why can't I say boring company? Why do I have to say boring company?
Well, because instead of it being an adjective, it's a verb.
Or a noun?
I think it's also a verb.
Oh,
Actually,
no.
it's a gerund, right?
Yeah, it's technically
it's a gerund. And we got the ing
it's so
thing.
It's a gerund. Come on.
So that's really very confusing about the English language. So a gerund is an ing form of a verb that can be used as an adjective, a noun, or a verb.
Let's just say it's the name of the company and move forward with the program. What do you think? So Elon Musk, he is famous not for Boring Company. What's he famous for?
He's famous for SpaceX.
Oh, I was going to say Tesla.
Oh,
He is famous for Tesla. He's also famous for SpaceX. And he's also famous for creating a company that's going to bore tunnels underground.
So listeners, you are probably familiar with Elon Musk. If you aren't, he's one of these inventor, entrepreneur, business billionaire kind of guys that you see on the world stage these days. He has all kinds of different ideas and technology companies, and he's making a lot of money from them. And this is one of his less well-known companies. We mentioned that he's well-known for being in the space business with a company called SpaceX. He's known for electric cars with a company called Tesla. But he's also made a lot of news with this company, Boring Company. And he's made news for a number of different things. It's kind of like a company where he does his interesting projects, right?
Yes.
So what are some of the things? Josh, you briefly mentioned one of the things, this idea we're going to talk about today, tunnels.
Yeah, so boring tunnels under areas in order to create new transportation opportunities.
But they've done other things. They were in the news for making flamethrowers. Basically, it was not a real flamethrower, but it was a thing that shot fire.
It was a thing that shot fire, and there was a video that was posted on Twitter of Elon Musk using it in order to shoot some flame around.
So you might be inclined to think when you hear these sorts of things that this boring company, and maybe even Elon Musk, are out to get media attention. And that may be partly true. But as it turns out, and we're going to find in this article today, there is often something to these ideas. These are ideas that he thinks are really worth exploring. And so he's decided to put some of his wealth and time and talent behind that and see what happens. And so today, particularly, we're talking about the tunnel. Boring Company is opening a tunnel. To get into the story a little more, I think we should probably just do our first reading. So listeners, if you have your Advanced Studio Classroom magazine with you, you can turn to page 27. Of course, we're looking at the June magazine, and this is the lesson for June 14th. We're going to do our first reading by looking at the left-hand column on page 27. So join us in your magazine there as we do the reading together.
Elon Musk's Boring Company is opening its tunnel. On a recent misty night, the growl of heavy machinery and the white-hot glare of floodlights were the only indications that engineers working for billionaire Elon Musk were digging a tunnel beneath the city of Hawthorne, California. 2 years after Musk complained on Twitter that Los Angeles traffic was driving him nuts and that he was going to just start digging to escape it, his newest venture, the Boring Company, has opened its first tunnel. The tunnel starts in a parking lot near SpaceX and runs for about a mile through a neighborhood between the 105 freeway and Hawthorne Municipal Airport, ending at a closed cabinetry business on Prairie Avenue. It's not a route that's in high demand, but Musk says he envisions a network in which commuters could board platforms the size of parking spaces called skates, which would sink like elevators and merge into the tunnels, whisking riders to their destinations at speeds of up to 130 miles per hour.
Okay, and so this article essentially starts with a description of a construction site, a project site. And if you have ever been driving along the road at night and you come across road repair or something like that, you will be familiar with a lot of the words that are being used here. They say, on a misty night. And of course, when we're talking about mist, we're talking about fog or something like that. So it's a cooler night and there's kind of a cloudy atmosphere. You can hear the growl of heavy machinery. David, that's sort of creative language, right?
Oh, yeah. It's sort of, he's describing the atmosphere of the moment, right?
That's right. And then they use even more creative language and say the white-hot glare of floodlights. So that's big lights, right, that are shining onto the work site. And those were the only indicators that engineers who were working for Elon Musk were digging a tunnel beneath the city of Hawthorne, California. So these guys are at work on a tunnel. This is a construction site, right? And in the second paragraph, they get into the story of why on earth Elon Musk is digging a tunnel. Josh, tell us about that.
Well, Elon Musk complained on Twitter, which is one of his favorite platforms for sending information out there, that Los Angeles traffic was driving him nuts and that he was just going to start digging to escape it.
Okay. And this is sort of not really it seems like an odd thing to do, to tweet out that you're going to start digging a tunnel, right? But it's actually, this is something the public has sort of become used to from Elon Musk, right? When he announced SpaceX, he sort of said, I'm going to start a company that's going to space. And people were like, oh, really?
And then he did.
And then he did it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so you never know how to take these things from Elon Musk.
Well, or billionaires in general, right? So if somebody who doesn't have a lot of money thinks that the traffic is driving them crazy, so they're going to dig a tunnel in order to escape it, you'd think, oh, well, that person is going nuts, meaning they're going crazy. But when a billionaire says that, then it means something a little bit different.
Yeah, they might still be crazy, but they actually have enough money to do something
about it.
About it. Yeah.
So he was looking for a network of tunnels, and I guess that's the reason people were questioning this, because the cost of building an entire, freeway system or a highway system is very high, and that's on the ground. If you're building it under the ground, it's even more expensive, right?
Especially when you're talking about Southern California, where there has been an earthquake every once in a while.
Yeah.
So earthquake environment, you have all kinds of things that are probably already under the city that you have to contend with. But nonetheless, we find out that now this project has started. It's actually happening. And then they go on to describe the tunnel. Tell us a little bit about it, David.
Well, so it will start in a parking lot near SpaceX, and it's going to run for about a mile through the neighborhood between these two areas, and it's going to end in a closed cabinetry business on Prairie Avenue, assumedly in another open area. And so it'll be about a mile long. And the idea actually is that you're not going to be driving through this tunnel. It's not like a regular tunnel, just like you're driving under a river or something. It's actually going to be an automated system that will take you from one place to another, almost like an escalator, but much faster than any escalator we've ever ridden on in our lives.
The idea is just so big, it's hard to wrap your mind around. So
Yeah.
let's break down some of the terms there in that third paragraph. So the tunnel starts in a parking lot. This part we understand, right? The parking lot is near SpaceX. That's the name of one of Elon Musk's companies. And then it runs for about a mile through a neighborhood. I guess actually under a neighborhood would maybe be a better way of saying this. And then it gives the location, the area where you would find this in California. And it ends at a closed cabinetry business. What is a cabinetry business, Josh?
It's a business that makes cabinets.
So it's like carpenters making things out of wood, right? Cabinets, but this business is closed. And so the tunnel is maybe cheap real estate. Right? He bought it, and that's where the exit of the tunnel is. It goes on to tell us that this route, I guess you could say route, depends where you're from, right? This route or route is not in high demand. So why do you suppose he is building a tunnel between a parking lot and a closed business that not very many people are going to want to take?
Well, it's possible that there are a few people who would want to take this route, and one of those people might be Elon Musk.
Might get him near his home.
Right.
Right,
Because he's
exactly.
trying to avoid the commute.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
and so I guess kind of as a great opportunity to test it out.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. I feel like this is an experiment.
It does seem experimental.
Very
Yeah.
expensive.
So if the tunnel's a mile long, that's kind of long enough to test out some different ideas, but not so long that you're investing your entire fortune in the idea, right? And also if it's in an area where there isn't a lot of demand, so for example, a closed business, if the closed business has been there a while, it suggests that the real estate in this area is maybe cheaper. And so you can do things like run tunnels underneath without maybe too much worry.
So this reminded me a little bit of maybe Elon Musk's own Batcave.
Right.
Where he's got
Yeah.
like his own sort of like secret entrance in and out of work.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with DC Comics, Josh is talking about Batman, who of course isn't always Batman. Sometimes he's a rich guy, but he goes down into a secret base, a secret bat cave.
And he has a secret tunnel that he can drive his Bat car in and out of.
There you go.
And it's really cool.
And it's really cool, and he doesn't have to worry about the
Elon
morning
Musk
commute.
is Batman.
There you go.
Elon, that's what we're actually saying here.
Okay. So this route might not be high in demand, but like you mentioned, Dave, Musk says he envisions a network. And in this network, what's going to happen, Josh?
Well, then commuters using these system of or network of tunnels would put their car on a platform that he would refer to as skates here, that is about the same sort of size as a parking space, that then this entire platform would sink down like an elevator and then be whisked away through this network or a system of tunnels.
Okay, now I will be honest here. I don't know too much about his plans for engineering this tunnel. But when I hear this language, the thing I think about is vacuum tubes.
Sure.
Do you both know what vacuum tubes are? Listeners, if you're not familiar with the idea, if you go to places like a Costco wholesaler, you will notice there are all of these tubes that they put these little packages in, and then the package gets sucked up through this tube to a central place. There's kind of a vacuum pressure pulling things through the tubes. And I feel kind of like that's what these skates are. They're kind of like these pods that get sucked through the tunnel.
Sure. Earlier on in one of the previous advanced magazines, we had talked about the Hyperloop project, which is not being done by Elon Musk. It's being done by another billionaire. But it's sort of the similar kind of idea is that it uses air pressure in order to take these little individual packets and move them quickly around in tubes.
Now, we don't know that there's a vacuum or air pressure or whatever in here from any of this language, but we do know is that you're not driving your car through a tunnel. So it's not like putting a highway under the ground and letting people drive into the tunnel and then kind of like a private highway. It's not like that. You're actually not driving your car through the tunnel. Your car's being carried through the tunnel on these skates.
And it's not even like, so a famous tunnel of moving cars and people through would be, no, actually, I'm not sure if they do cars through the tunnel. Do they do cars through the tunnel or is it just people?
No, cars.
They do cars,
You
right?
drive?
So,
Yeah,
but that's
long
on
way.
a long train, right? So you're connected up on a train of a bunch of cars that are connected together. Everybody has to basically move on the same train at the same time, where this is just individual cars, individual platforms moving individually at high speeds
Yeah.
On their skate.
on their
skate.
skate.
Yeah, there you go.
Being whisked through the tunnels at speeds of up to 130 miles per hour, which is...
They're like 200 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, I just think
That
it's,
is, right?
at least 200 kilometers per hour. Yeah.
Okay, so a fast commute. My interest is definitely piqued. Let's move on to our second reading.
Yeah.
Listeners, again, you'll find that on page 27. We're going to have a look at the right-hand column. So let's do that now.
The hope, residents say, is that the tunnel will encourage a renaissance of sorts in a city that was hammered by deep cuts to federal aerospace spending in the 1990s. In the fall, officials approved 2 waivers for a futuristic elevator inside a garage where employees will practice raising and lowering vehicles into the tunnel and a spur to connect the elevator to the main tunnel. That future tunnels will be built as fast and unobtrusively as the one in Hawthorne seems unlikely, experts say. Musk's crews avoided messy construction by starting their tunnel in a parking lot, burrowing deep enough to avoid water lines and telecommunications cables, and building a shaft on private property to extract portions of the digging machine. This is the most exciting thing that's happened here in a long time, said Levi Stockton, president of Jet Center Los Angeles and Advanced Air at Hawthorne Airport. Nobody else is digging tunnels and building rockets in the same place.
Now, you might think that people who live in an area where there are tunnels being dug underneath wouldn't be so happy with the project. Sometimes you hear this term NIMBY, not in my backyard. Yeah, that's basically what it stands for, right? Where people don't want these big projects near them. But here it seems that residents are not entirely against this idea. It says the hope, residents say, is that the tunnel will encourage a renaissance of sort. Now, when we say Renaissance, usually I think of painters from about 500 years ago. But they're not using the word that way. What are they saying here, David?
In this case, they're talking about just a fresh kind of, a lot of new growth, new ideas, new development, a lot of just new life to their neighborhood.
Okay, and the reason they need this is because their city is not in great shape. It says here it has been hammered by cuts to federal aerospace spending. Now, when you're hammered by something, Josh, what's happening to
So
you?
you are really affected by something, right? So
Negatively.
Negatively.
Like you've been hit very hard, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so they've been hit by deep cuts to aerospace spending. Basically, that means there was a lot of work going on in the neighborhood connected to space, sending spaceships up, and then budget cuts affected that. So the local economy is suffering. I guess that's what we can sort of gather from that. It tells us in the second paragraph that officials have been approving something. What have they been working on?
Oh, they've been working on that great thing, if you're ever worried about bureaucracy and laws, waivers.
Oh, yeah.
The waiver is a great term. I don't know that I don't know that I hear too much about this term in Asia, in the news often, but it is very common in the West, this idea of having a waiver. Basically, the idea is that the government sets these regulations, but sometimes it will give you permission to not follow the regulations, and we call that a waiver. So the spelling here is interesting. It's not like a wave on the ocean, W-A-V-E. It's W-A-I-V-E-R, and the idea is when you waive something, as in a verb here, you are allowing it to pass without following the rules, right?
Exactly, yeah. So this was something that was very common in one of the cities that I worked in, Portland, Oregon. There are a number of city regulations around buildings, And for example, you had to build a building right on the sidewalk or right on the street. You couldn't offset or build a building back with space in front of it unless you got a waiver from the local neighborhood association. So that meant that developers all the time would come to our local neighborhood board and give reasons why they should be allowed to do something that wasn't in accordance with local regulations. And then if we voted yes, then they were able to do it.
And there were all kinds of things that waivers are given for, at least in my home country of Canada. You mentioned building regulations. You can think of environmental regulations.
Sure.
You could think of all traffic regulations. For example, police cars are allowed to drive through the stop sign if they have their lights on. That would be you're waiving that rule, right? For them. And so waivers are fairly common. It's a very useful word, and I hope, listeners, you will be able to make good use of it now that we've introduced it to you here. What have they got these 2 waivers for on this tunnel project, David?
Well, they approved 2 waivers for a futuristic elevator inside a garage, where the employees will practice raising and lowering vehicles into the tunnel. Yeah. So it's, I guess, I like how it's described as just a futuristic elevator. I mean, you don't really, you can have some ideas of what that is, maybe some flashing lights or something. But anyway, it's they also got a waiver, which will it'll also be a spur to connect the elevator to the main tunnel, right? So it's all part of testing out how it's going to work. The elevator will have to connect to the main tunnel. So they had to get a waiver in order to build these kind of perhaps new contraptions or new inventions.
Okay, so the language in the elevator part is fairly clear, but when we say a spur here, we actually mean just like a little side road or a side connection to
I would
something.
say side connection.
Yeah.
So maybe if you're looking at like a subway map and you see a short little side connection where it goes off the main line, that would be a subway spur.
So a little extra piece that connects to the main thing. That would be the idea. So you would actually see this term spur. You hear it when you're talking about railroads. You hear it when you're talking about roads. You hear it when you're talking about tunnels, all kinds of different things where there's a main thing and then sort of a connection to it. So basically, they are creating a spur between the elevator and the main tunnel. Okay. Now, it tells us in the next paragraph that future tunnels will be built as fast and unobtrusively as the one in Hawthorne, and this seems unlikely. Now, when we're saying that something is being built unobtrusively, we mean it's not really causing trouble, right?
Yeah, so maybe you don't see it, maybe you don't hear it, maybe it doesn't affect your day-to-day life.
So you think here about construction work going on outside your house early in the morning. It wakes you up. The dog is barking. It has intruded into your life, right?
Yeah.
And so it's obtrusive.
Or like, detours on your morning commute. Like, for 6 months while they're building this thing, you can't take a certain highway that you usually take. So you have to take a longer way to get to work, those sorts of things where intruding as opposed to being unobtrusive.
Okay, and so this paragraph here, it's essentially setting us up for this idea that this first tunnel has been built very smoothly without too much trouble. So there hasn't been opposition from, or at least too much opposition from local residents. There hasn't been trouble from local officials, and they've been able to do it fairly quietly and things like that. They go on to tell us here exactly how they did it quietly. It tells us in the next paragraph how Musk's crews avoided some of the problems. Tell us about that, Josh.
Well, so they were able to start their construction in a parking lot, and then they were able to burrow or dig deep enough through the ground that they weren't at risk of breaking any water lines or telecommunication lines, and that they were able then also to build a shaft or sort of a downward hole into the ground on private property to extract portions of the digging machine. So all of this means that they didn't have to interrupt other people's either property or business or daily life in order to make this construction happen.
It's an interesting idea because I wasn't sure if people owned the land under their house. You know, you normally think like, this is my land, I bought it. But maybe people can just dig tunnels under it.
Well, there's a weird thing with some land in the United States where you might own the land, but you don't own the rights to construction or mining underneath the land.
And we use all kinds of different words for those, but often they're connected to the word rights.
Exactly.
So, for example, surface rights, water rights, mineral rights.
Mining rights.
Mining rights. So people will own different rights to the same property, and I guess that's an example of what's happening here. But again, that's another possible future complication.
Exactly.
If these tunnels are built everywhere. It tells us in the last paragraph then that this is an exciting thing. Tell us about it, David.
Well, Levi Stockton, who's the president of Jet Center Los Angeles and Advanced Air at a airport in Hawthorne, says this is the most exciting thing that's happened here in a long time, which is kind of nice. You know, I feel like it's really the kind of the best conditions for them to be experimenting with this in this place that is really hungry for something to put them back on the map and make them an interesting place again. And Stockton goes on to say that nobody else is digging tunnels and building rockets in the same place. So it's like, not only do they have a space program, but they also have an underground tunnel.
So the first tunnel is a success, and we're going to have to follow the story to see if that continues to be true as this project expands. That brings us to the end of our second day of our newsworthy clips for the month of June. We hope you'll join us again for our third lesson. But until then, I'm Simon.
I'm David.
And this is Josh.
Saying goodbye for now.
So long.
Bye.